Hello, my lovelies. Welcome back to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the Kidner Bean, and today I'm not looking my most beautiful self because I feel like crap, so I look like crap. Today we're going to be doing a one-off. I would call it an angry nerd rant, but it doesn't really meet the qualifications. I am angry, I am ranting, and I am nerdy. But I'm not going to be commenting on any, let me bring this mic closer, anything like we've covered in our past episodes, like Game of Thrones, or Good Omens, or Rocko's Modern Life. Today we're going to be talking more about things that exist in my personal life, or at least that used to. And something a lot of people maybe don't know about me right away from looking is that I have a couple of disabilities. I have a connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I do believe the singer Sia just came out as also having this disorder. For more links about that, you can check out that in the description section down below. And I have a neurological disorder which causes all sorts of mass mayhem and planet-wide panic, which can vary on a day-to-day basis. Some days I feel really good, and some days I don't. Some days I wear multiple braces, and some days I run Spartan races. It can all vary depending on how well I take care of myself and how well I can self-monitor and self-advocate so that way I don't overdo things and wind up in a relapse. So for those who maybe don't know me personally, a little bit about myself. I went to USC as an undergraduate, and then I went abroad for a year and came back to get a PhD. And unfortunately, due to a lot of unforeseen circumstances and complications, I ended up leaving after 2 years with a master's instead of after 5 with a PhD. And a big part of that has to do with overworking yourself and this fine line between pushing yourself and killing yourself to get your work done. And overdoing it and self-advocacy and self-monitoring are going to be topics that I'm talking about today with regards to the academia and academic culture and how pushing yourself is seen as a measure of success. Now, as I had mentioned, I went to USC, which is a R1 research institution. An R1 institution would be the same as like a Division I sports institution, were that for research as well. And during the course of my academic career there, I was constantly pressured to overexert and extend myself. You were expected to, at least in your first year, be taking a full-time level of courses, which normally at the graduate level is 6 units, but for your first year they expect you to take 12, and also decide on a research topic to then start on your first big paper, which is usually considered to be your master's thesis. So in year 2, I was taking, at the request of my advisor and mentor, 9 units instead of the standard 6. I was supposed to be screening or presenting my master's thesis a semester early. I was teaching courses as a TA to cover your expenses as part of the contract with the university. Most PhD programs will not only waive all of your tuition fees, but will pay you a stipend in exchange for you being a TA for a certain number of semesters, depending on your program. So I was teaching, I was traveling a lot for conferences, I was trying to work on my master's thesis, and go to courses on my own. And despite doing my best to continue to self-monitor and self-advocate for my health, as I had done in the past, it became increasingly difficult to do that and to succeed. And doing this is hell on anyone, let alone someone with a disability. And what really got me sparked on this subject today was seeing some tweets pop up on my Twitter feed from people who are still in academia, who are killing themselves to get their research done and talking about having to leave after 3 years rather than completing the full 5 because that's what's best for their mental and physical health. And how this can vary from department to department, but in academia as a whole, that pushing yourself and this stereotype of the overworked and underpaid grad student is really a measure of success, that you can't possibly be doing good work if you're not dying on the inside. And that's something that I want to come out and say that is simply untrue. There were many people in my own department, not just myself and the handful of others who left, who were living well-balanced lives. They got 8 hours of sleep every night. They were presenting at multiple prestigious conferences and getting journal articles published. They were well on their way to their PhD. They had fun hobbies like ballet dancing or ballroom or beatboxing and things like that. So it is possible to live a full life and not just completely shut yourself out from the world and throw yourself into research until you're nothing but skin and bone and running exclusively on coffee and energy drinks. And the second your paper is published, you sleep for 3 years and then reconnect with your friends and family. And that is something that I want to come out and speak out against, because I think it's a very toxic stereotype to continue pushing forward in academia, and I think it's something that maybe isn't talked about a lot because you're considered to have a lot of privilege if you make it to this level of your education. So the first thing I want to talk about today is the difference between pushing yourself and killing yourself. And there's a fine line between the two, and so it's important to make a note of when you're moving from one to the other. Because yes, your advisors and your peers and society is going to push you to push yourself. And that's mostly meant to mean step outside of your comfort zone. Don't fall subject to procrastination. Actually read your assigned readings so you can produce the best work for yourself. It's not meant to be something that, pulling all-nighters every night for a year, which I did trying to finish my master's thesis, because the whole thing was just a total for lack of a better word. So pushing yourself is supposed to mean things that would normally step you outside of your comfort zone, seeing to what the extent of what you can do without sacrificing your mental or physical health. Killing yourself is when you're, doing things like pulling all-nighters, not just the night before a midterm, but for weeks prior. Shutting yourself off from your friends and family and other aspects of your life so you can fully dedicate 150% of your time to your academics. That's not okay. You are more than your research. Hashtag you're more than your research. So when do you decide when you're just pushing yourself or when you're killing yourself? And there's a lot of very severe ways that you can find this distinction. If you're falling asleep while driving because you haven't, slept in 3 or 4 days, if you're not doing things like self-care on a regular basis, if you're not showering late every day, if your laundry is starting to pile up because you haven't done it in a month, if you're taking more than a standard amount of caffeine or stimulants a day to get your work done, these are all signs that you're maybe going beyond pushing yourself and into killing yourself. Now, not literally like suicide killing yourself, but pushing yourself to the extent that you're causing damage mentally, psychologically, emotionally, physically to yourself and potentially those around you. Things like killing yourself that go beyond things like pushing yourself would be when you start to shut off personal relationships. When you stop seeing your significant other because it detracts from time that you could be putting into your research. When you don't go home for the holidays, not just because it's, fiscally or logistically unreasonable, but because you would rather be holed up in your dorm room or your student apartment or wherever it is that you happen to be, cramming for whatever deadlines are going to come after a given break. It's when you miss birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. It's when you become completely isolated from everyone who isn't you and your mentor. That is a very severe sign that you are now veering into the world of killing yourself and not just pushing yourself so you can succeed. Okay, so now that we've talked about the difference between pushing yourself and killing yourself and some giveaway cues that you can use as a way to self-monitor, some more subtle ways that I use when monitoring my own physical needs as someone with chronic conditions are things like, what is your energy level on any given day? If you can think back to a time prior to your current situation in academia, On a scale of 1 to 10, how good did you feel on a given day? How much energy did you have? If you were usually somewhere around an 8 or a 9, like 10 being completely perfectly healthy, you're ready to like run a marathon, and 1 being you're near death. Most people are usually around a 7, 8, or 9, depending on their various physical activities and levels. So for me, if I was usually at about a 7 and I started waking up every day at a 5, that's when I would start saying, okay, what can I cut back on in other aspects of my life so that I can then put that energy and time into self-care to make sure that I can put my best work into my academic projects, my social life, my overall sense of well-being. So a good way for self-monitoring is to, like I said, find that, base level measurement for how you are normally supposed to be feeling. And then, think, okay, for the last, 2, 3, 4 days, have I been waking up with that level of energy? If I've been waking up with that level of energy, has it stayed normalized throughout the day? Now, of course, if you're feeling a little more exhausted or a little more anxious or a little less because it's the day before a big exam, that's not necessarily killing yourself. That could just be you pushing yourself to prepare. But if for an extended period of time, you find that you're not waking up with that same level of energy and mental well-being and feeling refreshed, that's a time when you need to stop and say, what am I doing that's causing me to overexert myself, and how can I remove or minimize that so I can be my best? Because when you push past pushing yourself and into killing yourself, you're not putting forward your best work anymore. Pushing yourself is, yes, testing the boundaries of your capabilities. Killing yourself is when you're pushing past that and now your work is actually going to start suffering. And that's really something that academia as a whole needs to make very clear. That yes, PhD programs are supposed to be challenging and you're supposed to challenge yourself and push yourself to see what you're capable of. But they don't really give a good description of what that entails, and so a lot of people end up pushing past this boundary and overdoing it and putting in subpar work and not being able to complete their programs. So I would be happy to come around to any university that wants me to put up a PowerPoint presentation on self-monitoring, self-advocacy, and the difference between pushing yourself and pushing yourself too far, which I think is what I'm going to say for the rest of this video, because killing yourself could be triggering or too harsh of a word for some people, especially in academia when suicidal thoughts are a very severe problem. And speaking of academia and creating a culture that is surrounded in the well-being of their students, this is something that is severely lacking across the industry as a whole. Yes, I'm sure there are some universities with departments that are very supportive and have great programs and are happy to refer you to the wellness center at their university rather than deal with it themselves, and I'm glad that those universities have those programs in place. But just handing out a pamphlet at the beginning of orientation isn't enough. I mean, 9 times out of 10, those kids are just going to throw it away before they even get home. What's important is to make sure that you as a department are making sure that you're encouraging your students to, yes, do their best, go step outside their comfort zones, push themselves to see what they're capable of, but always reminding them to make sure that they're taking care of themselves first, that they're not giving up everything else in their life just for that one term paper or that thesis or that doctoral dissertation, which yes, is amazing, and every one of my friends who has a doctorate now looks back on it and the papers that they've published since then and are like, oh, good God, please do not read my dissertation. They all think it's garbage, much like anyone who's ever been involved in the arts will tell you that if you show them a drawing of theirs or a painting that you like that they put out a year ago, they're going to be horrified by it because you're constantly improving. And so you're holding yourself to that same standard looking at your work from before. Whew, okay, I'm rambling. So yes, universities need to stop promoting this idea that overexerting yourself and pushing yourself to and beyond your limits is the only way to guarantee success or to measure it. That if you're getting a significant amount of sleep, if you have a fully balanced life and a significant other and are going out occasionally on weekends or during the week, whatever your schedule permits, that somehow means that you're a less successful academic. And it's simply not true. And if you want to look anywhere for evidence, look at your faculty. They're not always holed up in their offices. They're there during office hours and then they're gone. They take their, once a X amount of semesters break to do their research, but during the year, they're doing their job. They're teaching courses. They're going to colloquium and conferences, but they're also having dinner with their friends. They're going out to see movies. They probably have social media. They're not just their job. They're not just their research, and you shouldn't be either. It is not right and it is not fair for well-established tenure-track faculty or even just run-of-the-mill lecturers in your department to hold you to a standard that they do not hold themselves. And a really clear, metaphorical image that I have of this is, for anyone who watches SpongeBob, the episode where SpongeBob enters Gary into the snail race, and he's pushing Gary and pushing him past his limits, and then when it comes to race day, rather than being well-trained and physically fit and ready for the race, Gary is on death's door. And SpongeBob keeps screaming at him, "Come on, come on, come on!" But watching Gary break down is really heart-wrenching for me because, well, one, it's just sad to watch, and two, it really rings home for me, not just as someone who tries to overdo it to live a regular, non-disabled life, but this was especially me during my graduate program and was one of the biggest reasons that I had to leave earlier than I wanted to. Alright, so one thing that I really want to take away from this clip is that during this scene, no one's expecting Gary to win. They just want him to be okay. The audience is booing at SpongeBob for being such a cruel owner. The race announcers are commenting on what a crappy guy SpongeBob is. All the focus on this is not on how Gary should have trained harder or how this is a, measure of Gary's success in the snail race. It's all a reflection of SpongeBob and how abusive and toxic he was being because he needed to succeed. And for some reason, this mentality, this focusing on the cause of the overexertion, the environmental, toxic, and borderline abusive causes in academia, that somehow doesn't transfer to the real world. Nobody in the SpongeBob universe blames Gary for not being able to finish the race, for not succeeding. They're concerned about his health and well-being. But for some reason, this notion of having to push yourself to and beyond your reasonable limits in order to succeed has been normalized in academia, and this mentality of this is toxic, this is not healthy, doesn't transfer, even though it's very obviously the same set of circumstances for a lot of people. And I think we need to take more effort at the institutional level and as an industry as a whole in academia, that we're making sure that we are more than our research. We are more than our jobs. Success isn't defined by the number of publications you can get out in a year. It's not defined by your degree. Those are nice things to have and are things that you should be proud of and should consider as successes. But things that you should also consider as successes are, how good do you feel on a given day? How are your relationships with the people around you? Not just your cohort or your colleagues, but in your social realm. How are your relationships with your family and friends? If you have a significant other, how is your relationship with them? Do you have time to do things that you enjoy? Do you have a hobby that you get to spend time on that doesn't cause you anxiety because it's taking time away from your research? If you can answer yes to any of those things, that is a much bigger success than someone sitting at their desk till 3 a.m. every day doing nothing but research and data collecting. So if you're not that person, you're not a failure. You are doing so much better than anyone can possibly expect from you. And I want to tell you that, me personally, I want you to at least have someone say to your face, it's okay that you're not giving all 24 hours of your day to your degree, to your research. It's okay to be human. You are human, so be human. Don't be your research. Be more. Okay, guys, that's all I've got for today on my Geek Suite after school special. If you want to see me do a video and learn more about my chronic illnesses and disabilities, let me know in the comment section down below. There's a very wonderful YouTuber named Jessica Kelgren-Fozard who has conditions that are very similar to mine, and I often refer people in my real life to her videos if I ever need to have something explained, because our conditions are close enough that we have the same types of problems and the same types of answers. So I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to her channel as well in the description down below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.